In this lesson, we're going to cover how to create lofted features. There are three different main ways of doing this, and in this lesson we're going to cover all three of them. And I have three different files that we're going to be using. The first one that I have open is called loftsections.ipt, and it can be found in your Chapter 8 exercise folder. A loft basically is going to be a blending from one section to a second, and could be the third, fourth. There's no limit to the number of sections that you can have. So very quickly here, I'm just going to go and click on the loft features from the panel. And in this case, you'll see that I have the existing geometry. It's just created on offset work planes. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the circle and the square. And if that's all I wanted, I could just go ahead and click OK. But I also have a point up here, so we could loft back to that point. Now there's a lot of control that we have. Under the Conditions tab, I can go back and define how I want that to actually be lofting, in this case back to that point. If I said I want it to be tangent, you see exactly what it's looking for. I also have a tangent to plane option, so if I had a work plane in there, at maybe at a specific angle that I wanted it to be tangent, I could go back and select that. In this case, let's see what it looks like with the tangent to the point. And if I go ahead and spin that around, you can see that the loft definitely did what we wanted it to do, lofting from the first shape to the second to the point and being tangent. Let's go back and create a more complex loft here. In this case, I'm going to delete that loft. In this case, it also leaves the existing sections. But now before we create the next loft, I'm going to go back and turn on this rail sketch that I already have created. And you see in this case, it's a spline, and that spline touches all three sections, or the two sections and the point. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say loft, and I'm going to select the two planes. And what I want to do now is make sure that I select the point, not the spline, because if you select the spline, it won't know what to do with it. You'll get an error. So in this case, I selected that point. But now you can see this is where we have our three different operations that are available. So we have rails and a center line, and then we can do an area loft as well. So in this case, I'm going to start off by doing a rail. So click to add. In this case, I'll select the spline. And there's no limit to the number of rails that you can have. So I could go back and I could change the orientation if I wanted to by having another spline on another face if I wanted to. So let's go ahead and click OK. See what that looks like. Looks kind of interesting. Let's go back. I'm going to edit that loft feature. And again, I can go back to the Conditions tab. And again, we can go back and change it to be tangent if we wanted to. Definitely see we get a different result there. But I also have a work plane. I'm going to turn the visibility of that work plane back on. And let's edit that loft again. And again, back to the Conditions tab. And let's select tangent to plane. You can see I get a much different result, being that it's now tangent to that work plane. The next file that we're going to take a look at is going to be the loft centerline. And as the name of the file suggests, we're going to go back and we're going to loft again from the circle to the square to the point, but in this case we're going to have it follow the center, in this case also a spline. So I'm going to go ahead and click on loft, and the sections again, circle, square, point. And I'm going to change the different operation in this case to a center line. Select the spline. See, we're getting somewhat the same result, but we're controlling it via the center line. And again, we can go back and do the exact same conditions if we wanted to. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and click OK to see that we definitely have our results that are a little bit different here. I'm going to go ahead and again delete that. And I want to show a different operation here. I'm going to create another loft. But in this case, I'm just going to go from the circle to the square. Let's click OK and see what happens. A very simplistic loft. But there are going to be times that you may want to go back and actually have some twist involved inside of your loft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the loft. Feature, back to the transitions, uncheck automatic. For the set, number 1, let's go back and redefine that point. And then point number 2, point number 3. And point number 4. So that looks a little bit better. Click OK. And you can see we now have the 90-degree twist happening inside of our loft. For the last file I'm going to open up is going to be called Loft Between. The reason I called it Loft Between, so I already have two features created that are disjointed, so just a cylinder and a square that I extruded. And what I want to do is reuse the existing edges of this geometry to loft in between. So again, go ahead and click on Loft. In this case, I'm going to select the top circular edge, and for the second one, spin it around, select the bottom of that to get our square. And if I go ahead and click OK, you can see that our loft has been created. Now we have a little bit more control that we can do with that. You see that in this case it's pretty much going in a nice straight line. Maybe what I want to do is have more of a tangency as it's going to blend together. If I right click Edit Feature, and let's go back under the Conditions tab. And under the Conditions we have a couple different ways of doing this. So we have the free condition, and that's what we have now, a nice straight line. We have a tangency, so think of a line and arc being tangent. And we also have a smooth G2. Think of it as being more of a spline. So in this case, I'm going to change both of these back to a tangent condition. Let's go ahead and click OK. And the loft is a little bit smoother. Maybe that's what I'm looking for. I can also go back and change the weight of a given profile. So again, if I go back, and let's go back to the Conditions tab. Right now, each one are weighted exactly the same. But let's say, in this case, let's change it to a weight of 3. In this case, the circle is going to go up a lot further before it starts its blend. So you can see that the preview is showing exactly what it's going to get as it's rolling back through. For the last portion of this exercise, I'm going to go ahead and open up another file called Loft Area. In this case, it looks exactly like our loft centerline, but I wanted to show a couple other things that we can do here. Again, I'm going to start off with the loft. I'm going to select my circle and the square. But in this case, I'm going to go back and I'm going to use the Loft Area tool. So in this case, I'm going to select a point on that spline. And you see that the spline that's used as the center line, as long as the spline at least touches the sections, we're okay. But in this case, you see that it rolls way beyond that, and that's okay. But with the loft area, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a point on that spline. And by doing so, what I'm going to be able to do now is define the area of that cross section. So what I can do right here is I'm going to place that right in between, so 0.5. So halfway in between my transition, I can now define the surface area. So if I put that up to 950, you'll see that the loft has changed. And right at that area, right in the middle, I'm at 950 millimeters squared. There's no limit to the number of these sections that you can place back in here to define the area. Let's go ahead and click OK. And you see exactly what's happening with our geometry.